And we will. The last question is again Robin. I've put at the end because it's a complex question. It seems to, and we'll actually coming to the in terms of time. I'm afraid for other questions there won't be much time, so I hope we'll have just a few minutes to answer this one. So Robin writes, this is a query about the evolutionary relation between language, with its crucial property of asymmetric recursive syntax, claimed by Chomsky and others to have been employed first in thinking, usually enhancing the species' capacity for planning and problem solving, and only secondarily externalized for communicative purpose, and B, mentalistic ostensive communication comprehension with its arguably recursive structure of embedded intention. If Chomsky is right about A, then it's not that language somehow evolved to enhance the potential of the pre-existing capacity for mentalistic ostensive communication, but rather language, in the narrow sense of a recursive syntactic system, preceded and enabled mentalistic ostensive inferential communication, and that language was subsequently externalized to enhance that capacity and was, of course, transformed in various ways by its use in communication. So it's a large question on a very interesting topic. So first, the notion that, so in any case, we all assume that cognitively able humans, in any case, and lots of other animals, have an internal representation system. And given that we can speak languages, the internal system has to have a complexity that's our internal system has to be such that indeed we can use what comes out externally. And so the notion, the notion that in the sense of a language of thought, pre-existed public language, and that public language came later and as a function to externalize some of our representational capacity, is one that makes, put in the broad term I've used now, makes quite a bit of sense. In fact, in relevance of the book, we suggested something inspired by, of course, by Chomsky, something of the same kind. When we compared a language to the elephant's trump, which elephants might wrongly think that a nose is something that's used to a prehensile organ to catch up, but basically, and then, if I remember, Steve Pinker independently, because he doesn't quote us, used the same example at length in his book, Language Instinct, and made a much better job of it than we had. So the way I would see things now, and we haven't talked about that in particular for a long time, but she may have a different view. But first, we know very little about the structure of internal language. And Chomsky's linguistic work is about natural languages, spoken external language, all the syntax and so on. So you may think that it's the internal language has to have the same syntax and the same vocabulary, but it's not obvious. It's also recursivity. So first thing, we know very little about it. A number of people now are working on that. Sue Carey, Standard, and so on, about elements of what might be the internal system for presentation. How much it's okay to call it a language, and so that how much does it resemble public language is an open question, and I would assume it's a much more mixed bag. But never mind. I don't know. Recursivity, I think, is in fact. It's very important, but still can be very important, still overestimated. So I would tend to say that about recursivity. And also, there's no reason to think it's special to humans and to language. So the action planning of some complexity involves recursivity. The Miller-Gallant and Pribram book, Plans and the Structure of Behavior, which was at the start of the one of the first output of the cognitive revolution. I think it's the late 50s or early 60s, was all about the recursive structure of planning. And if you look at the behavior of corvids, practical behavior, they wouldn't be able to, which have tasks and subtasks and so on, and creatively. So they have ways to represent things recursively. So I don't know exactly what the internal system of representation is in humans. But indeed, it has to be such that the things we can communicate, think in this system can be externalized by public languages, and conversely that we can understand, interpret expression public language by mean of that system. So linguistic language. So there's a play on word in that. It's a sensible play on word. There's commonalities between internal language and external language. We're talking about external languages. Chomsky, when he defines language, is about internal. But the object that he describes is the one exemplified in spoken language. In our paper, the mapping between the mental and the public lexicon, we gave one reason why there should be more of a gap than, say, Jerry Fodor would have assumed between language of thought and public languages. Namely, there's a principal reason. The principle is this: public language has to stabilize in a population. It's a coordination problem. Mental languages don't have to. So you can have many more, for instance, you can have many more concepts in your mind than there are in the language, because the language has to stabilize across people, and that is not so easy and takes time and so on. So you can add to your mental lexicon 30 new items every day or more, and you probably do actually, but you can't do that with public language. So something similar might be said for at least some aspect of syntax. I mean, some aspect of syntax. So take thing of the interpretation of subjunctive. It plays a role in interpretation. It's different across languages. So what is a mapping? What does it map onto in mental? I don't know. So I don't think that. I mean, these are very important and interesting questions. They don't stand in object. No source, I think, of objection to the notion that public language, as we know, became adaptive once we had ostensive communication, and once language could serve a function not to encode our thoughts, but to give evidence of them. So, which freed them of a problem of being relatively univocal or just with limited ambiguities, and to be able to give a kind of complete encoding of our thoughts and so on. So now they're extremely complex, they're very rich, but they're freed from quite a number of constraints that they would have if they were just externalization of internal language. So that's my half answer to your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a gigantic question, I know that, and there's all sorts of issues around the lexicon versus syntax, and whether the recursion typical of language is the same as the recursion typical of these action plans and so on and so forth, which I personally don't think. But anyway, yeah, it's huge, and I hope we get a chance to talk about it again sometime.
Yes, because truth of the matter is that I don't know, that was my last slide. More questions, but I see it's 10 minutes past the. So we probably have to call it a day. And I would like to thank you all.
Thank you. And we do have a hand up from Charles, if we just want to go to
yes,
him.
Charles.
If you can you allow me to come back to the very beginning when I had to I couldn't unmute myself. Your example of the foreign accent, which yes. I think is the same one as the one raised by the blush. Okay, you and Deirdre think, okay, unintentional communication is part of communication, and I say, yeah. I'm more strict, I want to leave that out of communication. We do agree that it's very important kind of meaning, right? But it is, so my proposal is that unintentional communication should be considered, what you call unintentional communication, should be part of the cognitive principle of relevance rather than the communicative principle of relevance. I mean,
yes, I know that's what that's what you've written in your book, and you explained. Look, Charles, sorry, you explain. Indeed, you've developed that view, and it makes sense. But there's largely terminological issues, and so of course, terminological issues are issues that can be discussed. But
it's not just a matter of terminology. I mean, I could happily accept to say, okay, I agree with, after all, with Sperber and Wilson, and have the unintentional part as part within the communication. But the social consequences, the differences between intentional and unintentional meaning in human interaction are huge, and
Yes,
the
yes,
responsibility shifts. The more we move from the explicit, strongly implicit, weak implicit to the symptomatic or natural, the more the responsibility shifts for who's responsible for the derivation of effects. So
yes.
so we need to pay a lot of attention to it, whether in the end we decide it is part of communication, or, as I propose, it is part of symptomatic meaning.
Charles, I agree with you. I agree. We should pay attention. The distinction you make are true. So the exact way we address them, you do in one way, we do in a different way. And there we should just agree to disagree.
Okay.
There's a lot of agreement otherwise. Yes, thank you. So the organizer were concluding the session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caitlin Reuter.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for contributing, and thank you especially Dan and Deirdre for sharing the paper with us and preparing or accepting our questions and answering our questions, and of course a lot to think about, so much food for thought. It was really, really inspiring and interesting, and I think we're going to go home and keep thinking about what we discussed here today. And we're going to try to share the video as soon as possible, and we will let you know when that's ready. Okay, Kate?
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you ever so much. I've put the link to the network in the chat. Please do look at what we're doing. Please submit to our upcoming conference deadline in about a month. We'd love to carry on this discussion then. Thank you, everybody, and hope to all see you soon.
Thank you.
And
Bye-bye.
thanks to
Bye.
Kate as well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.